Hey, welcome back. And as you know, I'm so glad that you are here today because specifically today, this is a conversation every single one of us needs to have. And if you don't need it right now, you might need it next week or next month. It's coming. Have you ever heard of Coach John Wooden, UCLA fame, probably the greatest basketball coach of all time? There's a handful of guys up there. He's in the top five, probably. If you know anything about college basketball, if you don't, no worries, but you know that name. John Wooden won 11 national championships at UCLA. Okay, Coach Wooden had some rules for how his team was going to play. He had this pyramid thing. You can look it all up. It's really a great leadership paradigm. But one of the rules that he talked about a lot was just this: as a team, we want to be quick but don't hurry. Be quick but don't hurry. The distinction between like those two things, that's our conversation today. Think about quick for a minute, right? Quick is disciplined. Quick is intentional. It's trained. It's ready. Hurried, on the other hand, well, what is hurried? Hurried is anxious. Hurried is reactive. It's compressed. It's not quite sure what is happening, but moving anyway, right? Because the motion feels like progress. That distinction between being quick and hurrying, that distinction, it really did matter on the basketball court. I think it matters far more in ministry. And most pastors that, I talk to, most church leaders I work with, they're not making the distinction well. Now, if you know me, right, you know that I love to move fast. And speed has legitimate value. Okay. I am not here to tell you to slow everything down. That would be its own kind of failure. Okay. And we'll get into that in a minute. But there are some things, right, that we should do fast, and it's good to do fast. We're going to focus on AI for a little bit in this too. But like AI and other tools have helped us go faster and helped make some things happen faster. That's a great thing, right? Think sermon ideation, for instance, high-level outlining, volunteer recruitment emails, meeting summaries, grammar checks, right? Scheduling logistics. Like faster is genuinely better in those places, right? Because you're not losing anything by moving quickly there. In fact, you're gaining things like time that you could invest elsewhere. Um, I'm going to call these kinds of things execution tasks. And that is where speed belongs. And execution, go fast. But here's the kind of categorical distinction I want to give you today, because I think once you see this, it's going to be hard to ignore it. There are execution tasks. There are also cultivation tasks. Execution tasks, but there are cultivation tasks. And they do not operate on the same timeline. Okay? Execution tasks. These are things that are logistics, drafting stuff, ideas, or, drafting emails, whatever, organizing, summarizing, reworking language that already exists, just trying to improve it a little bit. Move fast on those things, right? Like speed doesn't really cost you anything around execution tasks. However, cultivation tasks are, are different. They are things like complex decisions, pastoral care, team discernment, soul work, sermon formation, and internalization. These are tasks that you can compress, but you can't compress it without consequences. Like these cultivation tasks, they operate on a different timeline. And violating that timeline does not save time. It creates problems. And you will spend far more time actually repairing those things later. So with cultivation tasks, fast is actually slow, and slow is fast. And I know that sounds like a contradiction, right? But it's actually not. When you rush the discernment process, you are not making a good decision faster, right? You're making a hurried decision and calling it good. And that decision is going to bring you back into the room again and again to repair the conversation, for difficult meetings, for the decision, right, that has to be made a second time. That's not faster. And a second time always costs more. I mean, let's make this really concrete because this is such a big deal for leaders. Um, I am not here, right, to give you a principle. You know this about me. I don't want to just give you a principle without showing you where it lives in your week to week leadership. Okay. So let me just give you an example for a minute. This is just simple example. Let's say that there's a family that's in crisis. And this is going to be pretty basic. And I know you would not do this, but let's extrapolate this idea into every other idea where it fits. Okay. So there's a family in crisis. The pastoral conversation gets compressed because your calendar is full. That's not efficiency, right? There's a cost to that. The relationship might survive, right? But something shifts in the trust calculus, and you're not seeing it always right away, but you're going to see it eventually, and that matters, right? Like your team is navigating a significant directional decision, for instance. Another example, the meeting is scheduled for, 55 minutes because everyone is overcommitted, but this is a really important conversation. You're not deciding faster, you're deciding under pressure, and you're calling that leadership. How about this? Your sermon preparation gets front loaded into Monday and Tuesday because the rest of your week is meeting heavy. And by Thursday, you're not really forming anything, you're just finishing something. All right? There's a difference. And I don't bring any of that stuff up. No shame here, okay, at all. But I bring it up because we have all done it. I have done it. I still have a tendency to do this. It's kind of like the issue with important and urgent. You know, and we want to take care of all of them as if they're the same. They're not. So I'm telling you this though because like I have watched these patterns quietly build something in churches that the pastor just doesn't see until it shows up in the culture. And once it shows up in the culture, it's going to get really, really hard to get it out. So here's what gets built when ministry is always fast. Okay, so let's just assume that we treat everything as urgent. Everything is about efficiency, right? What you actually end up doing is building a shallow culture. It's not because your people are shallow, but because depth requires time, and you just never really protected it, right? So this is, by the way, a great place to see volunteers burn out, not because they're weak or not committed, but because their roles are just execution only, and you're treating them that way. There's no meaning behind it, no reflection for it, no kind of space or room to process what they're actually a part of. They just come in, do the job, and leave. They finish the task, they go home, and then they do it next week. I mean, eventually they stop. I mean, the leaders around you, they become reactive. In this kind of culture, they only see the pace. They don't see the reasoning behind it. So they respond to the urgency, but not the direction, right? That's not a staff problem. That's a pace problem. Like your church, your congregation learns to consume what you produce quickly, but they don't metabolize it, right? They walk out of Sunday with a note that they're never going to look at again, or a feeling that faded by the parking lot, because depth requires time, and they're not following that pace. Like you can produce a lot of ministry without producing a lot of formation. That's important. Speed can help you produce a lot of ministry, but you're not going to produce a lot of formation that way. And a church that never stops moving also never goes anywhere that actually matters. So speed doesn't, measure health, right? Like a river flows fast and can also be shallow. So what needs protection? Like not your calendar, it's really about your pace logic. That's what needs protection. So there are just a couple specific things I want to name for you, okay? Here's just a handful of things that I think you need to protect the pace around. One is prayerful pauses before significant decisions, okay? And this isn't like a check a box kind of thing, but like I think you should actually pause, and pause long enough to hear something other than your own urgency when you are stepping in to make significant decisions. And that is harder than it sounds because the pressure is going to the pressure is loud and it's going to want you to do something now. And you probably need to do something quickly, but not hurriedly. Be quick, but don't hurry. Okay, here's another one. Deliberate conversations with people that are directly affected by a decision. Being very deliberate about conversations with people who are about to be directly affected by a decision. And this is not like a summary email. Okay, I don't send anything important in a Slack message. Like eyeball to eyeball, real conversations that also have enough room in them for people to do something with this. You can't manufacture that in a compressed timeline, can you? For instance, time to think before acting, especially when the pressure to act is loudest. Pressure is not wisdom. Urgency is not always legitimate. Some of the worst pastoral conversations in history happened in the loudest seasons. I mean, let that sink in for a minute. And here's the last one: depth over constant motion. That is not laziness, that is leadership. Here's the move I want to give you this week. And I want to actually do this before your next lead. I would like for you to think about this before your next leadership meeting. Find one decision currently on your plate that you have been treating like an execution task, right? When it actually is a cultivation task. And here's what I want you to do. Ask yourself this: what would change about this decision if I gave it twice the time I've been planning to give it? All right, and then do it. Give it extra time. That is a productivity tip, right? I'm sorry, that is not, it's not a productivity tip. That's a structural leadership move. And I'll tell you what, it will change how this conversation goes. So remember, be quick, but don't hurry.